Welcome everyone to the penultimate entry into my WrestleMania Best to Worst series, where today we'll be covering WrestleMania's long line of WWE Championship matches. And I should note, just to clarify, this list will include all WWF Championship matches, all undisputed WWF Championship matches, all unified World Heavyweight Champion WWE Championship matches in WrestleMania's history. Basically any match in WrestleMania's history that included the WWE or WWF World Heavyweight Championship, the main title, is going to be on this list. So that's a total of 32 matches. There are actually more WWE title matches in WrestleMania's history than there are WrestleManias. Because of the way 9 and 10 played out, that is the case. Of course, the WWE Championship has been defended at every single WrestleMania, in the case of 9 and 10, more than once. Every WrestleMania except for the very first, which was... I've talked about this before with the first WrestleMania. Like, the goal wasn't necessarily to put on, like, the heart-stomping, ultimate mega card with all the big title matches or anything, but rather, like, just include celebrities in a pretty standard MSG card and then hope that they can grow their audience from there. And it worked in that aspect. But the WWE Championship, it's the most prestigious title in WWE history for obvious reasons. Of course, I've also talked about many times before how it's actually crossed over with various other titles, how the WCW title history has been merged into it. And various others. And of course, now we currently have, when WWE for a brief period operated with 2 world championships, those titles have since been merged. So the current WWE Championship actually has so many championships merged into it. The original IC title, I believe, like, the WCW US title is in there, the European title's in there, the hardcore title's in there. Just all tons of championship lineages have been merged into what is now the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. But to keep it simple, I'm only going to be covering, like, the actual WWE Championship matches in WrestleMania's history. And when you have a number one goal to shoot for, and you have a main championship, that's going to be the driving force or the focal point of many of your wrestling storylines, and that has certainly been the case of WrestleMania. A lot of the biggest matches and biggest moments in WrestleMania's history have centered around the biggest championship in the company's history. Hasn't always been the main event, although it has most of the time. So my final entry will be covering main event, so a lot of these matches are going to repeat in the final video in the series, but there is a distinction to be made there between WWE Championship matches and the closing matches, the main events, and different goals that those type of things have to accomplish. Of course, the WWE title is main eventing, then it has to accomplish all the goals of both the title match and a main event. But for a title match, you got to make it seem like you're fighting for the ultimate prize. And presumably you'd be invested in all the people involved, challengers and champion. And hopefully it would pay off very nicely as a nice conclusion to whatever story you've been building for this particular title match. So, with all of that said, let's get underway, shall we? Number 1, my favorite WWE Championship match in WrestleMania history is The Rock defending against Stone Cold Steve Austin at WrestleMania 17 in Reliant Astrodome, 2001. A lot of people have said that this is kind of the Hogan Warrior of the Attitude Era, and on paper it kind of is. It's the 2 ultimate big baby faces of that time period facing each other at a WrestleMania in a huge stadium with a big time atmosphere. The only thing that kind of kills it a little bit is that the show was in Texas, so there was no split crowd and nobody was cheering for Rock. They were all for Austin because it was in Texas. So, so you didn't quite get the same atmosphere as Hogan Warrior did, but you had a completely different atmosphere. It was kind of the climax to me, and I've talked about this before, how I feel like this match is kind of the end of the Attitude Era, and it was kind of the climax of everything, and the Big Hot period, and the Monday Night War period, and everything, because it was all downhill after this. It kind of was, with some ups and downs in between, but for the most part, it was like, all right, this is as good as it's going to get, and then sharp decline, and, we have what we have now. But anyway, this match was fantastic. And I've argued before that if it wasn't for the ending, this would probably be my favorite match in WrestleMania history. But before I get into the ending, I love so many aspects of this. Both Rock and Austin were such big stars at this point. Rock never quite had the unbeatable factor that Austin did, where Austin, you viewed him as kind of like almost like a Hogan in the sense that it was hard to picture him losing in most circumstances. Rock never quite had that. Rock was more of a Savage type, where Savage would lose a lot of the time, but he would win all the big ones. And Rock was kind of that type of babyface. So you didn't quite have that unbeatability factor for Rock going in. And actually, I remember thinking going into this match, I think Austin's going to win because Rock's going to go off and film another movie. So, the ending was never really in doubt as far as who was going to win goes. But, you had the two biggest stars of the time period, and they were facing off for the richest prize in the company. It just seemed natural to do this main event. I also remember thinking at the time that they could have done a triple threat with Triple H thrown in, believe it or not. One time it's you know what, they could have put Triple H into this main event, and I would not have minded, because, yes, he was the best heel in 2000. He would have earned that spot. So that was 1 year where Triple H could have main evented, and I would have had no problem with it. Boy, oh boy, I wish that was the case across the board, but anyway, this match was big. It was exciting. Did so many things. It was like watching Steve Austin's entire history in the WWF as a character being revisited and presented. He broke out the $1 Million Dream, which called back to his ringmaster days. They repeated the bloody sharpshooter spot from 13. Again, a lot of callbacks to Steve Austin's history, and obviously it was all building to the heel turn at the end, where he joined up with Vince McMahon and became the corporate champion. Now, it's the only thing that drags this match down for me, and it didn't at the time because it was such a shock, and it was okay, that's a really interesting thing to go out on. I wonder where they go with it. The problem now in hindsight, I saw where they went with it, and I hated it. Now it's Austin as a heel just didn't work for me, and it was clear to me that they were trying to create their own Bash at the Beach 96, and that's exactly what they were doing. They were trying, Hogan turned heel was huge, so we can do it too with our guy. The problem is that people were sick of Hogan by that point, so a heel turn was very natural. Nobody was sick of Austin yet. I can't think of anybody who was oh God, they need to turn Austin heel. No, I think everybody still kind of liked Austin, so it was just, all you did was piss people off, really, and not in a good way. They just kind of you took our hero away from us. Okay, goodbye. And I think maybe that's kind of made them skittish about doing major heel turns ever again with top guys. It's probably why Cena's never turned heel. Might be why they've been so hesitant to turn Roman Reigns heel. I don't know. But other than that, and again, like I said, that only came after the fact. It turned bad after the show. Other than that, I thought the match was very exciting. There was never a lull throughout the entire thing. Watching it again, I was just amazed that the crowd was just buzzing the entire time, and they were just on their feet the entire time. And Rock and Austin, it was violent, it was crazy, it was exciting. It was just a really wonderfully put together main event, and one that I loved. And I think the best match that the two ever had together. It's one of the most famous rivalries in wrestling history, and to me, this is their best showing with each other, and I thought it turned out spectacularly well. So that's my number one favorite WWE Championship match in WrestleMania history. Number 2, Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, WrestleMania 6. I've talked about this match before, but obviously I talked about it in the Intercontinental title match video, but yeah, it was just a huge match, especially as a kid. It was man, they're taking our two favorites, Hogan Warrior, asking us to pick a side and putting them together, having them fight. And even though the IC title was involved, it was title for title, really it was, okay, who's going to be the WWF champion? That's who we want to know. Can Warrior be the guy that beats Hogan? And he was. It was one of the finest moments in WrestleMania history, I think, as far as one of the best executed title changes. And everything from the atmosphere to the excitement to just watching these two guys knock the crap out of each other and do all their trademark stuff to each other. It was really one of those time stood still, this is history in the making type of matches. And you didn't get big babyface matches very often, if at all, back then. So that alone helps it stand out and is a major favorite of mine. And like I said, I think the match is better because Hogan lost. I think it adds so much more to the proceedings and makes it a lot more memorable that Hogan lost. And it makes it not that I'm a fuck Hogan guy. As a kid, I was a big Hogan fan, actually, but it was it just made the match more special and more memorable that they went the way they did. And this match will always stand up as one of my personal favorites. So, number 3 from WrestleMania 8, Ric Flair defending against Randy Savage. I've heard many people say, including Ric Flair, say that it should have been him and Hogan at Mania 8. Again, speaking as somebody who saw that match 8 billion times in WCW, I do not miss that we did not get that match at WrestleMania. Flair and Savage, it was the first of two main events. This was the first time they ever tried to have like a more than one main event style WrestleMania, and they build the double main event, Hogan, Sid, and Flair versus Savage. And they let Hogan and Sid close, which I'm going to elaborate on that more when I do the main event video. But I think a lot of people agree that Flair Savage should have closed. It was an outstanding match. And for a rushed build-up, and the build-up was pretty rushed, they managed to get a very personal story in there with Flair claiming that he had been with Elizabeth before she ever got with Randy, and that he had nude pictures of Elizabeth, which we never did see those pictures, by the way. And all that craziness. And Savage wrestled the match like he wanted to take Flair's head off, and that came across very, very nicely. And I thought, Flair and Savage, that's another match that I saw quite a few times. Even in the WWF later that year, and this was by far their best match. I think the personal element of the storyline really helped that. I thought Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect in Flair's corner, added a lot to the drama because he kept interfering. He gave Savage another obstacle to overcome, including a leg injury and all sorts of other things. It turned into this like kind of crazy free-for-all, and was very satisfying when Savage won the title, and then Elizabeth came down and slapped the holy crap out of Ric Flair after the match, which was great. Ric Flair bled during the match, which was added a little bit more, made it a little bit more colorful, if you will. And overall, it was just an exciting, stellar match between two all-time greats. I mean, that's really all there is to say about it. It was just fantastic, and will always stand as one of my personal favorites in WrestleMania's history. And probably should have main evented, but oh well. I'll elaborate on that more when I get to the main event video. Number 4, Randy Orton defending against Batista and Daniel Bryan in a triple threat match at the main event at WrestleMania 30. This was outstanding. I mean, this was just, I loved every minute of this because it was just so satisfying to see Daniel Bryan win the title. I mean, that's really what it was. And when you have a protagonist that you are so invested in and you want to see him win, and you're just dying to see him win the big one, and all the stuff that happened along the way. He got screwed over at SummerSlam. He got, all the screw jobs that happened in the fall, the Royal Rumble, he wasn't even entered in it, and that whole fiasco. Some of it was deliberately created, some of it was just something that blew up in the WWE's faces when they tried something else. Whatever, but whatever it was, it all combined and consolidated together to make an excellent story. And it built into this match. Daniel Bryan had to beat Triple H earlier in the night. He went into this match hurt, and that just made him more and more. You just wanted him to see him win it more and more. And the entire time you're sitting there just going, when are they going to pull the rug out from under us and have him lose again? And he didn't, and he won, and it was fantastic, and I loved it. It was great, and it really created one of the best. WrestleMania 30 was my favorite WrestleMania since 19. I said that. Daniel Bryan is the main reason why, because they gave us that story and they gave us that nice conclusion to Daniel Bryan's journey to the championship and to the WrestleMania main event. It's one of the best WrestleManias. I think it's one of my personal favorites, and Daniel Bryan's story is the main reason why. So yeah, I love this match. I just love it. And even when I watched it again, preparing for these videos, I sat there the whole time just sitting there going, when are they going to pull the rug out for, oh wait, Daniel wins this match, doesn't he? I got sucked into it all over again. I was just sitting there like, yeah, Batista's going to break it up and get the pin, or, oh, Randy Orton's going to break it up and get the pin. It's like, oh wait, I already know who won. But it worked so well that I just kind of bought it all. And it was very good. And again, the ending was very satisfying. And it was just great. Of course, it's also really funny that every 10th WrestleMania, the pure wrestling guy has to win the major title. At 10, it was Bret. At 20, it was He Who Shall Not Be Named. And at 30, it was Daniel Bryan. It's like, okay, so I guess at WrestleMania 40, we can count on the next big pure wrestling guy to win the championship. We shall see. But moving on from there, number 5, speaking of pure wrestling, Bret the Hitman Hart versus Shawn Michaels in a 60-minute Iron Man match. Really, no other guys could have pulled this match off, especially back then. Very hard match to work, going out there for an hour and having to pace yourselves the entire time and making every move matter, and stay interesting the entire way through. And I felt like, again, watching it again, I felt like they pulled that off. I was really surprised at how well paced the match is. At least I thought so. But that's just me. Again, it's also satisfying for Shawn Michaels' title win. His long journey getting to that point. The boyhood dream has come true for Shawn Michaels. Even if he was a prick back then, and everybody says he was a prick back then. It's not just Bret, and it's not just 2 or 3 guys. No, pretty much everybody says, yeah, Shawn was a prick back then. But it was still satisfying, and it was nice to see Shawn get his first world title, and his journey get completed. Again, another satisfying WrestleMania Championship win in a pure wrestling classic that really only 2 guys could have pulled off. During a time period, I should also ask, during a time period when really the WWF couldn't really offer anything else. Look, we got this amazing pure wrestling match we can give you, so because we don't have any celebrities, and Hogan's gone, and Savage is gone, and all this other stuff. So, but we can give you this. So, and I thought it worked out very well. Number 6, Shawn Michaels versus Steve Austin at WrestleMania 14. The Austin era begins, where Austin wins his first world title. WrestleMania really is the perfect stage to do first world title wins. And Austin's was great. He had to overcome DX and the whole drama with Mike Tyson and his involvement. And the whole situation was booked so well and handled and promoted so well that by the time Austin, caught the super kick, spun him around, hit the stunner, it was a perfect punctuation to Austin's journey to get him to that point. And from then on, Austin obviously became one of the biggest stars in wrestling history. And it was really funny because after this match, they didn't have too many opponents lined up for Steve. They just kind of, all right, we'll turn Mick heel because we don't really have anybody else for him. And, I guess we'll have him work with Kane and Undertaker about 1,000 times because we don't have anybody. They had Rock, but they had to prepare Rock to get to that point. So they had to build Rock up to Survivor Series before he could be a believable opponent for Steve Austin. So, but even during that period where it felt like they didn't have much for Steve, they did a lot with him. And of course, the whole McMahon storyline that carried everything. Coming after WrestleMania, but here, it was the birth of something special, where Steve Austin's rise to the top was culminated here with Mike Tyson's help and that very obvious fast count. It's okay. Michaels was unconscious the entire time anyway. He'd have been pinned, but it was all very good, and one of the best executed main events in WrestleMania history, from the title win to the way it was promoted to the way it was built up to the way it was all executed. Just great. It was beautiful. And a big match for Shawn too, who went into this match with obvious back issues. And again, watching the match again, it's like, yeah, you can tell he's in a lot of pain watching this. So, kudos to him for going out there, dropping the belt, doing the right thing. And it all came off magnificently well. So, yeah, no complaints. Number 7, Randy Savage versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 5. The Mega Powers explode. I love this one. This is kind of the definitive WWE Championship match of the 80s to me. It's like when you think 80s wrestling, you think of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage. That's just what it is. They were just 2 staples of 1980s WWF. So it was just natural to do this main event. And Savage had really proven himself as a main event player at this point. Hogan was obviously already the established star. And they worked this great storyline with Liz involved. And, they were the Mega Powers. And Hogan helped him win the title at 4. And then they were friends. And then, obviously, the partnership went south with Miss Elizabeth being the focal point of that, and that led to Savage's heel turn and just created a bunch of great stuff, and it resulted in a killer main event, I thought. And great WWE title match. Of course, Hogan won. Hogan had to win the belt back, but overall, it was, I thought, a very exciting match. One of Hogan's better matches. A lot of his best matches came at WrestleMania, and this is one of them, I think. Really enjoyable. Again, for the storyline, the characters, the drama involved, and just a really nicely worked match that I thought. And it was nice to see Hogan work with somebody smaller than him and still manage to play the babyface fairly well. And Savage was really great as the heel, so it worked. But instead of throwing Hogan up against another monster or another big guy, Savage was this quicker, faster, more athletic type that could outmaneuver Hogan and outwork him in different ways and gain the advantage that way. And I thought it worked out quite well. Very exciting main event, even if it was obvious that Hogan was going to win. Number 8, speaking of Hogan at WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that this was the match that drew the crowd, obviously, and really sold the show, but it's not really that good of a match. I disagree. I think, again, it's all about context and making things matter. And the story they crafted between these two, again, friends turned enemies, Andre's jealousy of Hogan's success, plus the fact that they had made Andre out to be unbeatable, convincingly. I mean, this wasn't like a Big Show thing where it's like, oh, he's mean now and he's a monster for 3 weeks. It's like, oh, he's unbeatable now, and it's like, he's going to lose to Cena at the pay-per-view. We all fucking know this. No, they had put in a substantial amount of time into Andre to make him convincingly unbeatable. Then they turned him heel, and then it was like, oh my God, Hogan's fucked. It's like, Hogan's going to die. He's going to get destroyed. And the way the match was worked, it was like Hogan was going to get destroyed. I mean, from the failed body slam attempt to just Andre just wailing on him and squeezing the life out of him with a bear hug and just sitting on him and all sorts of other things. It was like, oh my God, Hogan's done. I mean, it's one of those matches I watch it, I get sucked into the story every single time I watch it. I think I've watched this match because it's so big and it's so important to not just WrestleMania's history, but to wrestling in general. I think I've watched this match more than any other match in wrestling history, and it gets me every single time I watch it. And then it gets punctuated with that amazing ending where Hogan slams Andre and leg drops him for the win, and really the biggest victory of Hulk Hogan's career without a doubt. And a nice ending to the biggest WWE Championship match in WrestleMania history with a nice story, nice build-up, great payoff. And at the end of the day, that's all you want out of a big title match. So, like I said, I tend to watch this one every year at WrestleMania time, and I'll continue to do so for as long as I can. Number 9, WrestleMania 4, the very next year, Randy Savage versus Ted DiBiase in the finals of the WWF Championship Tournament. Randy Savage, because this was a tournament for a vacant championship, Randy Savage actually turned out to be the first man to ever win the WWE title at a WrestleMania. So, nice little significant thing there. The tournament itself had a lot of mistakes in the build-up. Like, we should have gotten Ricky and Randy in the second round. The tournament itself was kind of sloppy and mismanaged throughout, but it did all build to this nice concluding point where Savage ultimately defeats Ted DiBiase for the title, and that made it work. So it's like, okay, you know what, WrestleMania 4's got a shitload of problems with it, but the ending was very nice, and it was very satisfying to see Savage win the belt, to see him overcome Ted DiBiase and Andre the Giant with Hulk Hogan's help, and to see all that go down. And some people say it's like, oh, Savage had to cheat DiBiase. He had to cheat to beat DiBiase, and I was like, not really. I mean, DiBiase and Andre were cheating the entire time anyway, so it's kind of like, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. That's how I see it. But it was very nice, very satisfying ending to the tournament, and a very nice match. And it's also satisfying for me that Ted DiBiase has this under his belt. It was like, he never really got the heel run that he should have. He never really got the big main event runs that he should have. DiBiase to me is one of the greatest heels of all time, and he never really got the push that he should have gotten. I would even argue maybe he should have walked out of this WrestleMania with the title, but it is nice that at the very least Ted does have this WrestleMania WWE Championship match under his belt, and he played his role perfectly, and he shined just as much as Savage did, even though Savage ultimately got the win. I wish Ted had gotten a few more, but for what it was, it was great achievement from both men that they were able to pull this off. And a fresh main event, because it had all been Hogan versus the bad guy, the first 3 WrestleManias. So now we have a completely different dynamic where it's this new bad guy going up against this new hero. So it was like the first attempt at something fresh in the WWE title scene at a WrestleMania 2. So that was also very nice. I really like that one. Number 10, The Rock versus Steve Austin at WrestleMania 15. This match is pure fucking chaos. Typical of the Attitude Era, you get the brawls through the crowd, you get... it's a no disqualification match, so anything goes. And back in the Attitude Era, almost every single main event back then was no DQ. I'm going to say at least 90% of the pay-per-view main events during the Attitude Era were no DQ. And if they weren't officially no DQ, they treated them like they were no DQ anyway. So... Yeah, so it had a lot of that craziness going on, but for that type of main event, I thought it worked very well because they did all sorts of crazy shit in there. Like, the whole story with Mankind earning his way to be the referee, but he got sent to the hospital, so he couldn't make it. And then, all the craziness with Vince and Shawn and like 35 ref bumps and Rock and Austin kicking out of each other's finishers, which is one of the first times that this sort of became a thing, like the finisher fest. It wasn't very not by today's standards by a long shot, but it was the first time you kind of saw it. It's like, oh, you kicked out of my finish, I'll kick out of yours. And I guess you could say Hogan Warrior was kind of the first time that happened, but it was really more, this one was where it was more pronounced. And, it was also the concluding point for Steve Austin's journey because he had lost the title back in fall and had to overcome all of McMahon's obstacles to get back to this point. So it was the closing point to that. And for all the mistakes that this WrestleMania made, and they made plenty, good God, did this WrestleMania fuck up a lot, I thought the main event came off very well. And it was chaotic, it was fun, but it gave you the ending that you wanted, which was Stone Cold Steve Austin winning the belt back, with Mankind counting the 3, which made it even sweeter because it was like... because Mankind had been screwed out of the title, too. So to see him get revenge on Vince and The Rock was also pretty sweet. And it was a nice way to do it without making him an active competitor in the match. So, and not diluting Austin's story. So it was actually handled pretty well. And, really, really enjoyed the match. And another strong entry for Rock and Austin. Number 11, John Cena versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 23. Again, not very dramatically interesting because we all knew Cena was going to win. And there's not a whole lot else to say other than that, except that it was just a very exciting matchup, more exciting than it had any right to be, considering how obvious the outcome was. I don't remember anything they did in the build-up except for them being tag team champions, which I only remember because I remember them having them saying during the show that they were tag team champions. So it wasn't that great of a build-up. It wasn't that satisfying of a conclusion because when Cena won, you can almost feel the deflation from the crowd. But by the end of that match, I was kind of like, oh my God, Shawn might win this, And I was like, okay, I'm kind of digging it, and I really enjoyed it. It was, I think, Cena's best Mania match by a country mile, which again ain't saying much, but I thought it was an exciting main event and very good job for a match that had nothing going for it. I thought it came off very well, so kudos for that one. Number 12, Yokozuna versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10. This one is more where a lot of my biases come into play. Mainly, I like this one because Bret Hart won the title at WrestleMania in Madison Square Garden on my birthday. Because at the time, Bret Hart was my favorite wrestler. So it was a nice birthday present for me that he won the belt back. And it was even sweeter that he beat the guy that beat him the year before. And the year before, Bret had, he got screwed out of the title both in storyline and for real because Hogan stole the title at 9, which, yeah. We all know about that, and it was nice. It was satisfying and very gratifying to see Bret get back into that spot, and and win the title back, and beat the guy that beat him the year before, and then without Hogan to muck things up, it was kind of like, yeah, this is Bret's spot now, and you got the big celebration after the match was over. Where all the baby faces came out, and that was great. And then even better was that it set the stage for Owen and Bret later in the year because Owen had beaten Bret earlier in the night, and then Bret ends the show by winning the title. So Owen's like, I beat him, and he's the fucking world champion. This is fucking ridiculous. And what about me? He's just standing there on the stage going, what about me? What about me? And really set the stage very nicely for Bret knowing later in the year that cage match they had at SummerSlam obviously being the major highlight. So, so for all the good things they did, for the nice payoff, and for the nice, nice moment for Bret, I really like this one. Obviously, and there's a lot of stuff I remember about this one where Yokozuna hit that big belly-to-belly suplex and then set Bret up for the bonsai drop, and Yokozuna made a mistake, and he just kind of slipped off the ropes and fell backwards, hit his head, and which kind of made sense because earlier in the night, Luger had knocked him out with the bionic elbow, so it made me wonder, and I kind of put two and two together. That was like, he's still woozy from that bionic elbow, and he kind of lost. That's why he lost his balance on the ropes there, and Bret was able to capitalize and get the win. So it's like, I don't know if that was done on purpose, but that's how it made sense in my mind. And I don't even think the commentators made that call. But again, this is just the way even my 9-year-old brain worked back then. So, really, just a really very satisfying title win. And really, the WWE Championship at WrestleMania is a perfect way to give very, very satisfying championship wins. And from there, we move on to number 13. At WrestleMania 20, Eddie Guerrero successfully defending the WWE Championship against Kurt Angle in more of a pure wrestling match and kind of a nice wrestling match. It wasn't as good as the Triple Threat main event from that same show, but for its spot on the card, I thought it was quite good. I gotta be honest though, the Eddie Angle matches, I don't know why, and this is true of almost all their matches, they never quite reached the level that I would have expected out of them. I don't know, like Eddie and Angle, you would think it would be one of those fantastic, like, awesome, 5-star match type of pairings, like Benoit and Guerrero, or Benoit and Angle, or Jericho and Benoit, or no, Benoit's in a lot of those, or like Jericho and Angle, or Eddie and Ray, or Eddie and Malenko, or something. You would have expected those two to mesh together like something on par with one of those. And they never really did. It was just kind of like, oh, they're good, but they never really quite reached that next level. And I don't know why. And I remember at the time this show happened, a lot of guys were giving this match like 4 stars, 5 stars. I'm like, all right, guys, let's calm down. It's not that great. It was a perfectly good match, though. It was perfectly fine. Didn't work as well as the main event did, but that's why it did main event. So it was perfectly fine. I thought the finish was kind of funny with Eddie untying his boot and Angle going for the ankle lock, only for the boot to slip off, and Eddie able to get a cheap, not a cheap, but a quick roll-up in. And overall, just a nice, solid wrestling match. Nothing special, not a match of the year or anything like that, but in the annals of WWE Championship matches at WrestleMania, I thought it was good. I thought it was quite good. So, again, it was just perfectly fine. Number 14, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, versus Seth Rollins at WrestleMania 31. This was just really good booking to get out of a very bad situation because nobody liked Roman Reigns. Nobody, he was the Royal Rumble winner this year and everybody hated it. They built him up to this point. Everybody hated it. And it's funny because you have Brock Lesnar, who's this unbeatable monster god. He ended the streak. He destroyed John Cena. So you would think that he's getting set up for the fall here at WrestleMania for the next big babyface. And everybody hated Roman Reigns. So you have this situation where the unstoppable monster guy is the one that everybody's cheering. It's like, oh my God, they really shit the bed on this one. So, you have this situation where Lesnar is absolutely destroying Roman Reigns the entire match. Like, the entire fucking match. And I love how the revisionist history of WWE is like, oh, Roman Reigns could have won that match. We'll never know now. And I'm like, Lesnar hit the F5 before Rollins ran out there. So, no, Reigns did not almost beat Brock Lesnar. No, he didn't. That was not, no, you're wrong. You're so wrong. But anyway, so yeah, it's like we're supposed to feel bad for the babyface getting his ass kicked by this brute, this monster. No, everybody cheered. It was a birth of Suplex City, which that tells you that gives you an idea of what the fans were thinking back almost a year ago, actually, or was it over a year? I don't remember the exact date of last year's Mania, but so they fucked up their babyface, but where this match worked is that they did their very first Money in the Bank cash-in at WrestleMania with Rollins cashing in the Money in the Bank and stealing the title by defeating Roman Reigns. So it was like, all right, so you potentially allowed a situation where Roman Reigns can be fixed. They did not capitalize on that, but they created a situation where he could be fixed and stories could be written for him going forward. They put Seth on top and created a new top heel, which is fine. And Lesnar is protected because he didn't technically get, like, he lost this match because he wasn't, he obviously lost the championship, but he was not the one that was pinned or submitted, so he has that out where it's like, okay, but the monster got fucked, and that set up Lesnar and Rollins later in the year, so they got a lot out of that. In my opinion, they got a lot more storyline potential out of doing it the way they did than they would have if they just straight up given Reigns the belt at WrestleMania. So, like I said, it was just a very well crafted, well booked scenario to get out of a really bad situation. And speaking as somebody who does not like Roman Reigns as a babyface, it was actually kind of nice to see Brock Lesnar just throw him around for 15 minutes or whatever it was. So, yeah, Suplex City, bitch. So, yeah, it's like, this should have been a disaster. They made it okay. They made it okay. Through some really good booking. Number 15, Sergeant Slaughter defending the WWE Championship against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7, a match that Hogan would win the WWE Championship, his third WWE Championship in total. A lot of people hate this match and thought it was in poor taste that they took advantage of current events with the Gulf War and everything. Of course, the war ended before WrestleMania took place. Oops. You can't. I guess you can't predict how world events are going to play out, but. I guess there's a point to that, but to me, like, a lot of forms of entertainment use current events to tell stories and stuff. Yeah, I mean, when 9/11 happened, how many shows and how many movies tried to, like, reference 9/11 or, take advantage of that. Not take advantage, but, like, reference that situation in a way that people could identify with and tell their stories. And actually, referencing, tragedies and all of that other stuff. I mean, that's how Godzilla was born, and I'm a big Godzilla fan. It's like, if Nagasaki and Hiroshima hadn't happened, we wouldn't have Godzilla. So, sometimes tragedy and tough current events, they spark creativity. And, people get ideas, and they tell stories around those ideas. And that's, human history is... where you're going to get a lot of great ideas for potential stories. So, me personally, you had a clear-cut babyface, you had a clear-cut bad guy in Sergeant Slaughter, who actually played the role surprisingly well. I mean, Sarge was great, and I always loved Sarge as a babyface. I actually associated him more with G.I. Joe than I did wrestling, because I loved him in the G.I. Joe show. Watch G.I. Joe the movie. Sergeant Slaughter is fucking great in that movie. I mean the 1987 animated movie. Yes, Sarge is awesome in that film. But, I thought overall, you had your heel, you had your face, and then the face won in a match that was better than one would have expected it to be. There were a couple mishaps here and there, like Sergeant Slaughter putting Hogan in the Boston Crab when Hogan's right next to the ropes, and Hogan just not grabbing for the ropes for whatever damn reason, which Regis Philbin on commentary made sure to point out. A couple of things like that, but overall, you got to see Hogan get his ass kicked, and Sarge doing a bunch of things that would either give him the win over Hogan or get himself disqualified so he could save the title. And ultimately, as he does always, Hogan came back, won the belt, and it was overall a nice ending to WrestleMania 7. I'm not saying it's one of the greatest main events or world title matches in WrestleMania history. It's not perfect by any means, but I was okay with it. It was fun. I was fine. And of course, for a 6-year-old, it was amazing. So, 15, that's about fair. Middle of the road is where I would put it. Number 16, I'm going to catch the major heat for this one. Kurt Angle versus Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania 19. And people tell me all the time that this is one of the greatest matches of all time. And I rewatched it again, guys. I'm sorry. I just don't see it. I just don't see how this is one of the greatest matches of all time. Some people say it's a pure wrestling classic, and it's great wrestling purity on display, and I'm like, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But to me, it's like I don't necessarily have a preferred style. I mean, if you want to be a high-flying match, or you want to be a pure mat wrestling match, or you want to be a hardcore match or whatever, whatever you want to do, as long as you have a nice story in place, or the context is there, or whatever they're fighting over actually matters, or whatever the scenario is, as long as I care, that's all I care about. It's like, I'll go for whatever you want to do. If it's two big lumbering fucks, beating the shit out of each other, or if it's two high flyers bouncing all over the place, I'll go along with it as long as I care who wins and I care who loses, and there's a face and a heel that I can get behind, or the story's interesting, or some kind of reason to care. And the build-up to this match was good on paper, like mechanically, a lot of the things that they did with Lesnar pursuing Angle and everything. The problem... Lesnar just doesn't work as that type of babyface, especially now that I'm seeing what he's like now. He's kind of a meathead, dickhead, asshole type that's an unbeatable monster that kills people. So making him like this underdog that has to overcome all the odds to beat the heel champion, I'm like, it's miscast. Like, Lesnar just doesn't work in that capacity. I think he works as the obstacle that needs to be overcome. And, and the unstoppable force. That's where Lesnar's best served. And as a babyface, he works in like scenarios like the one with Seth Rollins, where it's like, oh, you establish this dickhead Seth Rollins, and you want to watch Lesnar fucking kill him, man. That's how that works. And but Lesnar is like the underdog babyface trying to right the wrongs that were done to him, and beat his evil manager that screwed him and all that other stuff. It's like, Lesnar doesn't really work in that capacity. He should either be a monster heel or a monster babyface that is working with chicken shits that run away from him. That's how he's best served. But for what it was the match was good. I thought the match was perfectly fine, except for the fact that they botched the finish. And that's another point of contention for me. It's like, guys, we're saying this is one of the greatest matches of all time, and they botched the finish. Thank God Lesnar did not die doing that shooting star press where he came down on his head. He clearly knocked himself loopy, and that third F5 was clearly something that they pulled out of their ass just to get out of a bad situation. Again, there are worse ways to handle things fucking up on you, and they handled it about as well as they could, considering Lesnar didn't know what planet he was on, and Angle basically had to go, oh shit, we got to come up with something. But like I said, the match was good. WrestleMania 19 is one of my favorite WrestleManias. It had so many big matches on it. I think personally this match is, like, when you look at Hogan, McMahon, and Austin Rock, and Shawn and Jericho, I mean, this is one of the weaker of the main events, I think. I mean, it's not... If it's better than Triple H and Booker, it's not by much. And that's just my opinion. And that's... I know. I'm going to catch heat again. But like I said, it's not a bad match. I'm not saying it's terrible. I just don't... I never saw it. Was never one of my favorites. It was just, I never understood how it got so much praise, or as much praise as it did. To me, it was just like, it was a good match with a botched finish. That's how I saw it. But moving right on to number 17, Batista versus John Cena at WrestleMania 26. Had a good atmosphere to it. I mean, Batista and Cena were the two big stars for the brand split era, so it was nice that we finally got this match at WrestleMania just for the sake of getting these two to face each other at WrestleMania. They had the match at SummerSlam 2008, which Batista won. I thought this match was good, and like I said, had a nice atmosphere to it. Very sloppy in places, unfortunately. Like Cena's top rope 5-knuckle shuffle, where he came off and clearly made absolutely no contact with Batista, which they then insisted on showing a slow-mo replay of, which made it even funnier and more obvious how badly Cena missed him. Batista did a DDT where he almost dropped Cena. He looked like he dropped Cena on his head. And Cena did an attitude adjustment where he just basically flung Batista in the air and it's like, yeah, if you land on your head, I don't give a fuck. And it's like, guys, you guys are pros, right? You should be taking care of each other a little bit better than this. But they even kind of fucked up the finish where they were going to do the top rope Batista, where Batista counters a flying drop kick into the Batista bomb, which is what he did at SummerSlam 2008. And they tried to repeat that spot, except I think Batista might have been a little too far away, so he kind of caught him with kind of a shitty spine buster instead of the power bomb, so it didn't quite have the same effect that they were going for. And Cena just beat him anyway with an STF. So, but overall, I mean, with those problems aside, I thought like I said, the match had a nice atmosphere. It was overall better than Edge and Jericho. I'm sorry, it was. And overall, about as good as it could possibly be, given that Cena was going to win anyway, and it's like, Cena overcomes the odds again. Oh, surprise, surprise. And given that there's bits of sloppiness to it, it's still okay. I mean, it's still solid. No damage was done. Like, we'll say that. Again, aside from the fact that Cena won, and we all knew he was going to win, so I was like, fuck it, whatever. But that's that scenario. Number 18, Randy Orton versus John Cena and Triple H in a triple threat match at WrestleMania 24. Thank God this match did not main event. It was solid for what it was. Randy Orton retaining was shocking it was actually, the guy retaining was actually the shock. And like a good shock. It was like, oh my God, Orton retained. Because I thought for sure Triple H or Cena was walking out with that belt. So when it didn't happen, I was like, okay, cool. Of course, Orton just dropped the belt at the next pay-per-view anyway, so it didn't mean anything. But, good, solid triple threat, nice action in it, and a shock ending. No damage done. I can live with that. And like I said, thank God it didn't main event, because I was so fearful that match was going to close, and because it didn't, it comes off better. So, Yeah, that one, like I said, no damage done, so we're fine. Number 19, CM Punk defending against Chris Jericho at WrestleMania 28. This is another one I'm going to catch heat for. I watched it again. I watched this match again, and I'm sorry. I don't gravitate to this match like a lot of other people do. It's okay. And I thought the closing sequence was very good. Like, all the reversals and the submissions that they were doing to each other towards the end was very, very good. Unfortunately, and this is where I'm going to defend Jericho and Punk, I think having to follow in the Hell in the Cell was a little bit too tough on them because that match had 8 billion kickouts and 45 billion chair shots, and this match just wasn't going to live up to it. It should have come before the Hell in the Cell. Cena Rock could follow the Hell in the Cell because that match had been built up for a year. Punk and Jericho didn't have that to it, so to me it should have come a little bit earlier in the card. I mean, I know CM Punk is pissed that he never got a WrestleMania main event, but this was a year where it's like that was really unavoidable. 29 should have been his year, which I'll cover that in a minute. But it was, like I said, Punk went over, which was good. I wish Jericho had won the Rumble. That would have helped to make this match mean a lot more. They gave it to Sheamus, which was anticlimactic as fuck. I mean, all that build-up for Jericho and he loses at the Rumble and nothing happens. It was like, okay, the world will change as you know it, and then nothing happens. It's like, okay, thanks for that. So I wish that they missed an opportunity there. They did that. Then they added the last minute, they added if you get disqualified, you lose the title stipulation to Punk. And I don't think the crowd really digested that, or they really fully understood it, because it was literally tacked on at the last second. So when they started working the match around Jericho trying to get Punk to get himself disqualified, trying to anger him, it almost came across kind of confusing and kind of awkward. And then by the midway point of the match, they stopped doing that anyway, so it really didn't matter and made no impact. So, like I said, it didn't really matter. So, there were a lot of things they could have done to make this match better. From a booking, not Punk and Jericho, but from a booking standpoint, things they could have done to protect it and make it come off a lot better. And they didn't do those things, and the match suffered because of it, which is a shame. Again, it's not a terrible match. It's just not particularly strong, especially when you compare it to Punk and Jericho's matches later on. The match they had a month later was far better, I thought. They had a match on Raw, I think it was the next year, that was outstanding. They had a match at Payback the next year that was outstanding. This one, I think it's the weakest match the two had together, but hey, that's just me. That's just me. It was nice to see Punk be in a WrestleMania World Title match, though. The only time he ever got that. Of course, he never got that main event, but hey, what can you do? Number 20. Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy at WrestleMania 2. The first WWE Championship match in WrestleMania history. Very standard. It was Hogan versus the big guy, but they threw a steel cage on there back in the days when, making a steel cage actually meant something, and it wasn't just a cheap gimmick. This was actually like, oh my god, they're locking Hogan in there with a monster, and he's injured. Of course, he no-sold the rib injury by the end of the match, as Hogan would do, and it's like, ugh. So that didn't mean anything. But overall, it wasn't a terrible match, and you got some violence out of it because Bundy bled, and you got to see things like Hogan power slamming Bundy and all sorts of other stuff. So it could have been a disaster, but there really was no WrestleMania standard for WWE title matches at this point because it was the first WWE title match. So for what it was okay. It was fine. It could have been worse. It was painless, I guess. But like I said, there was no standard yet, so it benefits from not having to be compared to anything prior to it. It was like, well, it was the first of its kind, and to date, the only true steel cage match in WrestleMania history, not counting the Hell in the Cells, obviously. And it will probably be the only steel cage match in WrestleMania history, because steel cage matches, nobody gives a shit about them anymore. But and because of the horrible way they've been promoted and executed over the last few years. But, it was what it was. I don't really have anything too bad to say about it. I don't have anything too good to say about it. It was just sort of there on a WrestleMania that was kind of herky-jerky to begin with. So it was there. Like I said, no damage done. We're going to start getting into the ones where damage was done. Don't you worry. Number 21, Rock versus John Cena at WrestleMania 29. Why the hell did they not let Punk enter WrestleMania 29 as the champion? Just to do a repeat that nobody wanted. It's like, oh, they did Rock and Cena at WrestleMania 28, once in a lifetime. And I'll talk about that match in the next video when I cover main events, but when Rock went over the year before, I was like, holy crap, we're getting a rematch, aren't we? And by damned if they didn't do it, once it's like Royal Rumble, it's like, all right, Rock's going to beat Punk for the title, and Cena's going to win the Rumble because fuck you, that's why. And I'll be damned if that's not exactly what they did. And if they wanted to have Rock and Cena in the main event again, it's like, okay, can you at least have Punk in there to make it a triple threat? That would have made it so much better because it was really, they were the three guys. It was in the equation, and Punk, you know, he'd been champion for so long that by that point it's like, might as well just get him to Mania and have him drop it then where it means the most. And Punk even said in the podcast, is like, look, make it an elimination match and have me go out first in 5 minutes. I don't care. At least then I'll get my WrestleMania main event. It's like, I don't give a fuck at that point. I got what I wanted. And yeah, there's a lot of things. They missed so many opportunities here to do cool things. This was probably the best opportunity to turn Cena heel because, you know, I had the idea that he could have been behind the Shield the whole time, and this could have been the match to really do that and pull the trigger on that. They didn't do it, and it's probably too late to turn Cena heel at this point because they've had so many great opportunities and they didn't do it. This match was kind of dull because it was kind of a repeat of the year before. Again, it was a repeat of a match that we didn't need a rematch to. So, yeah. I wish Cena had just beat Rock the first time so we wouldn't have had to go back to this well. I mean, you know? It was very finisher-festy. It was the entire, like, the whole, like, last bit of the match was just them AA, rock bottom, AA, rock bottom. The only cool thing they did was referencing the People's Elbow spot for Cena from the year before that almost cost him. Well, it did cost him at 28, and then they called back to it, and Cena, like, suckered him in doing the exact same thing, showing that he had learned from the year before. That spot was cool, but other than that, I didn't care who won. I knew Cena was going to win, and it was just a rematch that nobody wanted, and that's just how it was. And I was there in person for this match, and I clearly remember it getting boring chants, so, you know, that was just what it was. Number 22, Triple H versus The Rock versus Mick Foley versus Big Show at WrestleMania 2000. It sucked that Triple H won. It should have been Rock and Triple H one-on-one from the get-go. You didn't need to do the whole McMahon's in every corner thing. Didn't need to be a four-way. It should have just been for artistic integrity. It should have just been Triple H and Rock one-on-one. Rock goes over, wins the title. If you want to have Foley, it's like, all right, put him in Rock's corner. If you want to have Big Show, I don't know why the hell. Yeah, Big Show was apparently promised the WrestleMania 2000 main event, which is why he was kind of shoehorned into this. And it was like, okay. Because Big Show and Rock had their whole controversy at the Royal Rumble 2000. I remember that whole thing. And, you know, Rock, it's like so many of these guys I talked about, all these big stars that had their big WrestleMania title wins. And this should have been Rock's year, and it wasn't. And it's like, that's a shame. But, okay. Yeah, it was just a very deflating ending because it was just kind of like, oh, all that for nothing. And too many components, like I said, with the McMahons in every corner and too many guys in the match. And it was just too many working pieces. It just came off as kind of a mess. And then you get that huge disappointment at the end. It's like, that didn't feel like the ending to a WrestleMania. It felt like the ending to a Raw or to a B pay-per-view. It's like, but this is how you're ending WrestleMania? It's like, lame, but okay. Sure, whatever. Number 23, Bret Hart versus Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9. Match was going good. Bret showed that he could work with big guys quite well and actually got one of Yokozuna's better matches out of him. The problem was the finish, where Bret got screwed out of the title, which isn't a bad thing, where it's like, okay, Yoko beat him and you've established a new monster, and then that sets Bret up to eventually beat him down the road, which he did at WrestleMania 10. Unfortunately, there was a second WWE Championship match, which is coming up later in this list. You all know which one I'm talking about. An impromptu WWE Championship match that came about after the finish to this match, but because it set up that match, this one gets knocked down significantly. It just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth. So, number 23, Bret versus Yoko at 9. Number 24, Diesel versus Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 11. I've already said this is one of Shawn Michaels' weaker WrestleMania matches. There a lot of people have said, kind of like WrestleMania 8, it's like, yeah, the title match should have closed over LT and Bam Bam, and I'm like, this match wasn't that great either. So it's kind of like, would it have made a difference? Probably not. But there was some sloppiness there, and Diesel this was the first time I'd noticed it, where the crowds really started to turn on Diesel, and the crowd, you could hear it. Go back and watch it. The crowd started to turn on Diesel in this match. It was not good. It was just not a good scenario. I mean, it wasn't like Roman Reigns or John Cena bad, but it wasn't good. And, it was a mediocre title match to my pick for worst WrestleMania of all time. So there was that. And that's how this was to me. And, Pamela Anderson and Jenny McCarthy look good. I'll say that. Number 25, Lex Luger versus Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10. Not a good match. It was a callback to their SummerSlam match the year before. Their SummerSlam 93 match I thought was great, except for the finish where Lex Luger celebrated losing by countout. It's like, dude, you didn't win the title. Stop. Calm your shit, okay? But, there were a lot of story components going into WrestleMania 10 with Bret and Yoko and Luger and Bret both winning the Rumble, and Luger and Yoko and their whole history. So there was a lot of stuff going on here. So it was good that they did this match. It was just not a good match. It was just very slow-paced, very dull. And then Luger ultimately lost, which was fine. And he lost because Mr. Perfect disqualified him for putting his hands on him, Mr. Perfect being the special guest referee of this match. And it seemed to set the stage for a Mr. Perfect Lex Luger feud down the road. And actually revisiting their feud from WrestleMania 9, they had wrestled each other at WrestleMania 9, and Luger beat him and knocked him out post-match. So obviously Perfect was getting revenge on him for that. But they never followed up on it after WrestleMania. I think Perfect cut a promo after WrestleMania, and they never really followed up on it, never really did that feud, and I don't know why. It's a shame that they didn't do it, because I thought that was one of the interesting storyline developments coming out of this WrestleMania. But match itself was weak, and really the saving grace of it is that it is a stepping stone to the real main event, which was Yoko and Bret, which set up Bret's title win. So it actually worked better that Yoko retained the title, and then Bret was the one that ultimately beat him. All those months that Yoko was champion, he got by Luger finally, not legitimately, but he finally holds a victory over Luger now, and then he goes up against Bret again, and it set him up for Bret to beat him, and it worked out quite well for that. So as a stepping stone, it worked quite well. As a match on its own, it was kind of weak sauce. But, whatever. It at least served a storyline purpose. I'll give it that. Number 26, Chris Jericho versus Triple H at WrestleMania 18. Good God Almighty, I hate so much about this match. It's just poor Jericho. Just poor Jericho. Every time he was in a title match at WrestleMania, something happened to fuck him over. But here, it's like he's the undisputed champion, and he becomes Stephanie McMahon's bitch. I've said it before. He was really just a placeholder for Stephanie. I mean, Stephanie was the real heel in this match. She was the real thing that Triple H had to overcome. Jericho was just a placeholder. He was just a guy carrying the belts. And, Triple H, did his whole storyline where he got hurt, came back, won the Royal Rumble, earned the Mania title spot. And he's going up against a piece of shit champion, so it's like, all right, we all know Triple H is going to win, and nobody really cares because you didn't build any intrigue in the story. It's like you didn't build up Jericho to a point where you would want to see Triple H beat him, and that was the problem. It was kind of like, all right, we know, and he looks like a piece of shit, so it's like, can we just get this over with now? And they got it over with. I'll give them that. The match didn't go too long, but it was just a sad example of how not to book a champion and how a title win could be very unsatisfying. Where it's like, all right, Triple H had this whole journey where he got hurt, won the Rumble, got divorced in storylines and all of that stuff, and you felt nothing for him by the time it was over because the obstacles he overcame, specifically Jericho, didn't feel like that big of a deal. And it's like, It's like, okay. I mean, it's kind of like the U.S. And this is a very bizarre example, but remember the U.S. hockey team that beat the Russian team, the Miracle on Ice? People forget that they had to win another match after that to win the gold medal. They had to win another game. Nobody remembers that other game because after they beat Russia, it was kind of a foregone conclusion. Of course, they had to come from behind in that game too, but it was kind of like everybody remembers the Russian game because the Russians were the toughest one. And it's like, really, I mean, what was the toughest obstacle for Triple H in the build-up to this? Winning the Rumble, really, because once he won the Rumble, it was like, okay, he was never really challenged again after that. I mean, I know they did the thing in February with Angle, but they did away with that pretty quick. And, yeah, it was just whatever. Poor Jericho, first undisputed champion. He looks like dog shit. He's one of the worst champions in WrestleMania history. Sorry to say that, but it's true. Through no fault of his own. Again, I will make that point perfectly clear. Jericho, it's not your fault. If you see this, I'm not blaming you for this. You are completely blameless in this. It's just, you are the poor, unfortunate soul that got put into this scenario. All right, number 27, John Cena versus Triple H at WrestleMania 22. Fuck this match. Just fuck it the hell. Edge should have been the defending champion in this match. I say it all the time. That's it. That's all I'm saying about this. Because I got to talk about it again when I talk about the main events. And I've got a lot more to say. So it's like, might as well just save it for the main event video. I fucking hate this match. I fucking hate this match. I fucking hate this goddamn match. And why is it not lower on the list? Because the other ones are actually that much worse. That's how bad we're getting here. Okay. When we're talking about damage that was done... Okay, number 28, Miz versus John Cena at WrestleMania 27. That match was a fiasco. Between Miz looking like a bitch in the build-up to where really they were building up Rock and Cena and Miz was just the afterthought, which the commentators even said during the match. I'm like, well, I mean, I guess you shouldn't be saying it, but it's true. I mean, it's, you know, honesty's the best policy. And this match is just, it was just a three-ring circus of awful where, nobody believed that Miz was a threat to Cena. Then they did the double countout where Rock restarted the match, and they did the anonymous Raw GM crap, which that was one of the worst things they ever did. I mean, they basically made Raw look stupid for like a year and a half, for however long they did that. It was too long. We'll just say that. And all that. And just this whole ring around the rosy bullshit just to have Rock screw Cena. I'm like, you could have just had Rock screw Cena. I mean, did you really? I mean, that was a long walk for a short glass of water, and the match itself was dull, kind of sloppy. Cena looked out of it the entire match. I don't know why. And it was just bad. It was just really, really bad. And Miz retained, which was the best part of the match. But again, Cena just beat him for the belt the next pay-per-view anyway. So I was like, well, so Rock's whole screw job doesn't mean anything. It's like, okay. It's like, if he had kept Cena out of the title picture for like 6 months, holy shit, it would have been like Rock really cost Cena there. But he didn't really cost him because Cena just won the belt back the next month anyway. So it's like, fine, whatever. Excuse me. So yeah, that happened. And I've still got 4 more to go. It's like, man, we are really digging at the bottom of the barrel here for some of these. Number 29, JBL versus John Cena at WrestleMania 21. This was anticlimactic as fuck. It was a horrible way to end JBL's title reign. And I'll say it right here. I actually enjoyed JBL as champion. He was more of an old school heel. Cheated all the time and did all sorts of crap like that, but I thought it worked, and they got heat on him by the fact that he kept saying he was a wrestling god, and nobody believed that he was a wrestling god, because, no, Chris Benoit's a wrestling god, or, Shawn Michaels, those type of guys, Undertaker, Kurt Angle, those are the wrestling gods. You're just a flabby piece of shit who smiles all the time, and you're just an asshole, and he's like, yeah, he's also a racist and a bully, and it's like, goddamn, it's like, this guy's great. I thought he was just a great heel champion. I really enjoyed it, and I thought he was going to go out with a blaze of glory at WrestleMania, and Cena was like, clearly they were setting up Cena to be one of their next big baby faces. If I'd only known what we were going to get for the next decade and forever and ever until the end of time after that, I would have probably flown to WrestleMania and just attacked Cena with a lead pipe just to stop that whole thing from happening, but clearly, I mean, we all knew Cena was going to win the belt here, but in that good way where it's kind of like, all right, he's the new babyface, and we'll see how he goes from here. It was a shitty way to start Cena's run. It was a horrible way to end JBL's. And really what they did wrong, some people say it was like, oh, they didn't get enough time. It wasn't so much the time because Hogan and Iron Sheik in the Garden, people still talk about that match. That match wasn't more than 5 minutes. But at least they had Hogan break out of the camel clutch, the move that won Sheik the title, so Hogan overcame those odds and then won the title. So it was like, all right, he overcame the thing that beat Backlund and won the title. It's like, all right, you told that story, and it makes sense. And it was satisfying. With here, JBL only ever won because he had outside interference and a bunch of screwy things happened. There was nothing keeping his stable from helping him win the cabinet. He had the Bashams and Orlando Jordan at the time. There was nothing keeping them away from cheating in this match. But apparently JBL had no master plan. He was just going to go at it clean as a whistle. And ultimately what happened is that Cena didn't have to overcome any odds. And oddly enough, it's like, where are the odds? Come on, Cena's not overcoming the odds here. What's going on? And he just beat JBL straight up. And it's like, well, anybody could have done that. Undertaker could have done that. Eddie could have done that. The problem was that they couldn't overcome all the fluky bullshit or the cheating or any of that other stuff. And by not doing those things, it made Cena's title victory feel very anticlimactic. That said, the best part about this whole match was JBL's entrance. I love that entrance with the police motorcade and the dollar bills all coming down from the rafters. I'm like, that was one of my more favorite like specialty Mania entrances. JBL had another good one the next year where the entrance ramp kind of opened up so the limo could get in. So JBL had a couple of cool WrestleMania entrances. But literally, his entrance is the best thing I can say about this match. This match was anticlimactic as fuck. It was poorly booked. It was a disappointing way to end a heel title reign and an even more disappointing way to end or to start a babyface run on top. And like, you look back at like Austin beat Shawn Michaels at 14. Very well booked, very well handled. I already talked about Hogan's his first big title win over Sheik. They at the very least they had him overcome the move that beat the previous champion, so that made sense. And people still talk about that match to this day. Shawn Michaels had to wrestle Bret for over an hour and into overtime to win his first world title. So many other scenarios of guys winning their first world titles and all these satisfying situations. Daniel Bryan at 30, which was perfect. And this is John Cena's first world title win. Kind of a wet fart type of scenario, I think, personally. Although an indicator of things to come. It's like, yeah, this is deflated, boring. That's it? Is that what we're getting? Yeah, that basically sums up Cena's entire run on top, where it's like, oh, Cena won. Yay. Okay. So yeah, this match is so low on the list because of how anticlimactic it was. Number 30, Psycho Sid versus The Undertaker at WrestleMania 13. Basically, you had a champion who won the belt because Shawn Michaels lost his smile and there was no build-up behind the champion. And you had a challenger who was in this match because the Royal Rumble winner had already been nullified by this point, and he was wrapped up in a feud with Bret, and they were doing their submission match, Steve Austin I'm talking about. So Undertaker was like the only babyface left, so might as well put him in this. And so you had a title situation that nobody cared about. The only thing you could really potentially care about is like, well, I guess it's okay that Taker's going to win the belt. But they even managed to fuck that up by not even giving him a clean win. And not in that cool WrestleMania 4-way, but in that shitty, like, the heel helped the babyface win. So it's like, okay, so fuck that. So you took that away from us. It's a no disqualification match. Didn't make it any better. It was just a boring match. Just a boring, slow, plodding, boring match because you had no story, no reason to really invest in it. Except for Undertaker winning the belt, and they even managed to ruin that. But again, I don't blame either guy. It's like, it's not Sid's fault. It's not Undertaker's fault. It was just a really, really bad situation and one of the most boring WrestleMania main events of all time through no fault of their own. It's a shame that it happened the way it did, but what can you do? Number 31, Triple H versus Randy Orton at WrestleMania 25. Boring, dull, terrible, awful. Triple H booking the match to where he basically beats a corpse by the end of it. long, overly long, terrible, awful. I'm going to talk about it more when I talk about the main event, so whatever. It was another shitty Triple H WrestleMania match. What else do you want me to say about it? But it wasn't the worst. That would go to Hulk Hogan versus Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9 to basically steal the championship and put himself on top again. One of the worst political plays in the history of professional wrestling. It's not the worst because it was 30 seconds long. It was the worst because it was a load of bull crap that Hogan basically just got to go in there and steal the title, take heat off the monster, take Bret's spotlight, and all like the behind-the-scenes bullshit that was going on to create such an event. That's why this was bullshit. Yeah, if it had set up Hogan and Bret down the road, I would have been okay with it, but... or at least I would have been more forgiving of it, but it didn't set up Hogan and Bret, so I'm like, well, fuck it. It was just a waste of time. And Yoko just won the belt back 3 months later anyway, so it was like, okay. I mean, I guess you could say, well, at least something happened. I mean, it was like, okay, I mean, at least this main event, like, some, like, crazy shit happened that you're going to talk about the next day. But again, when you, like, have an understanding of the behind-the-scenes politics that went on to create such a thing, it really is kind of shitty that it went down the way it did. But, yeah, I mean, it was what it was. You know, much has been talked about this match, so no reason to elaborate on it too much further. I will make this point, though, that for the main event best to worst video, I'm going to count this as one main event with Bret and Yoko, because I kind of reason that here it's two separate matches where the WWE Championship is on the line, so I kind of had to count them separately here. But for main events, it kind of plays off in the same segment, the main event closing segment, so I can count it as one main event. So I don't have to talk about them as separate matches for main events. So, you know, just an interesting, different little caveat there. And maybe, like, Bret and Yoko actually being a solid match before this kind of offsets it and keeps it from being the worst main event of all time. But it is the worst WWE Championship match in WrestleMania history. So, yeah, that'll affect the rankings for the main event video a little bit in the next one. But there you go. That's all 32 WrestleMania WWE Championship matches. Hope you all enjoyed that video. We've got one more video in the series to go where I close out with the closing matches, the main events in WrestleMania history. So, until then, stay tuned, everybody, because we got one more to go, and it's going to be a great one.